I've actually been making really excellent progress this year on my reading goal. I think it's 50 books, and I think I'm like 6 books ahead of schedule, which is actually really good. I feel like normally during the spring and the summer I tend to lose steam a little bit, especially because there's much more daylight. I would say it's nicer to be outside, but the last few weeks in the Midwest have proved that summer is not always better. I am a firm believer that summer is the worst season because I can't stand hot, humid weather. The only thing I actually like about summer is that it's lighter later, but then I'm actually worse at doing creative hobbies like writing and reading. I'm so much more productive at those in the winter because the darkness is inspiring for creativity, whereas in the summer I'm just too busy sweating in my own house to want to do anything. So I have made a list of all of the books that I'm most excited to read for the rest of the year. Obviously this list is kind of ambitious considering I will not be able to read this many books, but this is some new releases and some series that I want to continue, and also just some books that I've been meaning to read that are maybe finally going to happen. Probably not. The first book on my list is Arcana Academy by Elise Kova, and this comes out in a couple weeks. It is by the same author as the Heir Awakens series, which I believe I read like first half of the first book and then never finished it. Nothing wrong with the book itself. I think I was just not in the right mood to read it, so I definitely want to go back and perhaps read that series if I like Arcana Academy. Of course, it is marketed as a fantasy romance slash romantasy, so we shall see how I do with that because they are very hit or miss for me, and if they hit hard. If they miss equally hard. And this book is pitched as a woman who wields magical tarot cards lands herself in a false engagement with the headmaster of a mysterious academy, which, you know, I'm a sucker for any sort of academy or school-based tropes, so a woman falling in love with a headmaster and magical tarot cards sounds right up my alley, so I am very excited for this. The next book on my to be read is a very popular fantasy release of this year, and that is The Raven Scholar by Antonia Hodgson. I think this is another academia-based book. I actually just picked it up from the library, and I was thinking maybe I would read it on my beach vacation next week, but I feel like it's a little bit of a dense book to take to the beach. I think it is 656 pages, and this is pitched as an electrifying new voice in epic fantasy, a masterfully woven and playfully inventive tale of imperial intrigue, cutthroat competition, and one scholar's quest to uncover the truth. So again, very academia-oriented, and that can be extremely pleasing if it is done correctly, but if it's not, it can kind of just feel reductive. So I have good hopes for this one though, because it has a 4.5 average rating on Goodreads, and I've heard people say amazing things about it. Then we have my most anticipated read of the entire year, and that is The Strength of the Few, the second book in the Will of the Many series. I read The Will of the Many last year, and it was my favorite book of the year, and one of my favorite fantasy books, not only of all time, but also one of the best books that I've read in the last 5 years. Now, you can make the argument that the main character, Vis, has big main character hero energy who can do no wrong, and while I do see where people are coming from that, I just kind of don't care because it works with plot, and the plot is amazing, and Vis is not annoying, and all the side characters are really interesting and well woven into the tapestry of the whole novel, and I'm obsessed with it, and I cannot wait for The Strength of the Few. Early beta reader reviews are actually really good, which is so encouraging because you just never know with second book syndrome how something's going to turn out, and I'm so excited. We have Those Who Wait by Haley Cass. This is a romance book, another long romance book. It is 632 pages. This is by the same author of The Snowball Effect I read last year and loved, and I decided maybe I like long romance books, or at least I just like romance books that are written by Haley Cass, and this is actually the first book in the series. The Snowball Effect is the second one, so I figured I should go back and read the book that actually occurred before The Snowball Effect, and I kind of already know these characters because of reading The Snowball Effect, so that'll take at least a little bit of the intrigue out of it, but also it's their story and not the same characters that were in The Snowball Effect, so I think it'll be good. We have The Calculating Stars by Marie Robinette Kowal. This came out a few years ago in 2018, which I guess is more than a few years ago, which kind of pains me to say. It is part historical fiction and part science fiction. I actually just got this from the library also. I think I've wanted to read it for a while, but there were some less than stellar reviews alongside all of the really good reviews, and the less than stellar reviews were scaring me off a little bit, but I really need to get better at not only reading books that have high ratings because everything is so subjective and you just never know what goes into someone's rating. I remember them pitching it as the new Hidden Figures, which was the movie that came out about Black women's participation in NASA's space race, which I loved. Great movie, by the way. And this follows a WASP pilot and mathematician who earns her place in the International Aerospace Coalition's attempts to put man on the moon, but it is after a climate catastrophe. So basically the book says, what if there was a climate catastrophe during the space race, but the space race still happened, and it's a series. Sounds interesting. The next book is another potentially really good fantasy/fantasy romance, and potentially another drop-dead failure, and that is Silver Cloak by L.K. Stephen. And this says, in this addictive new fantasy series set in a world where magic is fueled by pleasure and pain, an obsessive detective infiltrates a brutal gang of dark mages, knowing that one wrong move will get her killed. I do love detective stories, and especially detective TV, so if that translates really well into fantasy, I will be a happy camper. The God and the Gwisen. This is the second book in The God and the Gumio, which came out last year, and it was a very unexpectedly pleasant surprise for me last year. Fairy Loot's picks in 2024 were not hitting, and this one came out of nowhere and was actually really good. It's a Korean-inspired murder mystery with demons and a bunch of different Korean mythology creatures, and the two main characters and their banter and chemistry was amazing. And the way that the first book ended, let me tell you, I needed the second book right away. It took all of my self-control when I saw this bookstore the other day to not buy it, and the only reason why I didn't buy it is because I pre-ordered the Fairy Loot edition of this book because I have the Fairy Loot edition of the first book and I wanted them to match. So I'll probably just wait for it to come in, but it did just come out and I'm very excited. Another big fantasy tome, The Devils by Joe Abercrombie. I've also heard amazing things about this, but I haven't read Joe Abercrombie's other series, and honestly this book scares me a little bit. I really don't like horror, and I don't think it's true horror, but I think it has horror elements, or at least just kind of campy horror, which I feel like has never really been my thing. Anything that leans remotely horror, even if it's done in like a satirical funny way, I just normally don't like. So I'm going to give it a try. I do have the Fairy Loot Epic Fantasy sub, and this was the first book in that, and I was excited. The edition is beautiful, but it is just, and it was on my radar even before the Fairy Loot Epic Fantasy sub. I'll read the description just because I don't feel like I'm able to talk about it without reading it. Holy work sometimes requires unholy deeds. Brother Diaz has been summoned to the sacred city where he is certain a commendation and grand holy assignment awaits him, but his new flock is made up of unrepentant murderers, practitioners of ghastly magic, and outright monsters. The mission he is tasked with will require bloody measures from them all in order to achieve its righteous ends. Elves lurk at our borders and hunger for our flesh, while greedy princes care for nothing but their own ambitions and comfort. With a hellish journey before him, it's a good thing Brother Diaz has the devils on his side. It kind of reminds me of Good Omens a little bit, but obviously I haven't read it, so I don't know whether that is an apt comparison or not, but the description reminds me of the first season of Good Omens. And of course, a big fantasy release on everyone's radar this year was Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil by V.E. Schwab. I have not started it yet. It also intimidates me a little bit. V.E. Schwab is kind of a hit or miss author for me. I really liked Addie LaRue, and I feel like that means that I might like this too, because people say it's kind of slow and character driven, and I'm not normally a fan of slow. I do like character driven, but not slow. But, you know, lesbian vampires, you just gotta read it, right? I mean, that's like the best pitch ever. I think it takes place in kind of 3 alternating timelines, so I'm pretty sure what will really determine my enjoyment or lack thereof of this book will be whether I connect characters in all 3 of the timelines, or if I'm more attached to one of them and the other timelines are really boring. My friend is reading it right now and they really like it, so we shall see. We have Alchemized by Senlin Yu. If you don't know anything and you've been living under a rock, Alchemized is the fantasy recreation of the fanfiction Manacled, which was a Hermione fanfiction that blew up over the years and is probably the most famous Draco and Hermione fanfiction. And I did read it, and it was definitely heart-wrenching. It's not my favorite Draco and Hermione fanfiction, which I feel like is a little bit blasphemous in the Draco Hermione fanfiction community. I've only read probably 4 or 5. I had a little phase there. And Draco Malfoy and the Mortifying Ordeal of Being in Love is my favorite. This one was just a little dark, and I am excited though to see how she translated it from a Harry Potter world to a real new fantasy world. I feel like this could be amazing, or it could really suck, because when you take away people's preconceived notions of what the world is already going to be like with a Harry Potter framing, it could all fall apart, you know. Another series that I want to continue this year is the Winnowing Flame trilogy by Jen Williams. I read the first book, The Ninth Reign, last year, and I thought it was a really interesting fantasy with some sci-fi alien elements, and I have always wanted to continue the series. I really liked it. Not that the first book was dark, but I felt like I needed a little bit of space from it before I continued, which is always a little bit of a risky gamble because I will probably not remember anything by the time I actually read the second book and will be very confused, which will detract from my enjoyment. But there's just so many things on my list, and I gotta be in the right mood for it. Okay, Catabasis by R.F. Kuang. Will I try it? Yes. Will I like it? Probably not. I'm gonna be honest. I've had some less than stellar reading experiences with R.F. Kuang, which I feel like is going to get me canceled before I even have 500 subscribers, but I enjoyed the first book in the Poppy War, and then I started the second one and DNF'd it, and I gave Babel, I think, 3 stars. My problem with R.F. Kuang is that she's obviously extremely intelligent, has amazing things to say, writes with the current world, and has good commentary in mind. But she writes like an academic. And while there's nothing wrong with that, I want to read fiction. And so my problem with Babel was the story was bad. Obviously, the concept was good, and it's clearly well researched, and the characters had moments of shine, but other than that, I just found it to feel a little bit like someone who's very smart is beating me over the head with a textbook and saying, you must believe this, you must believe this, you must believe this, without any trust that the readers are also intelligent people who can deduce subtext, and I feel like she has no ability to write something without just thrusting meaning into it, even though we can kind of determine that meaning for ourselves, if that makes sense. And so from people who agree with me, I've heard that Catabasis is like that as well, which is unfortunate because I think all of her concepts are amazing, but for me, the execution just doesn't align with my reading style. So I think I will give Catabasis a try, and if I don't like it, I'm not sure I will try anything from her again. Okay, we have Princess of Blood, which is another romantasy, and I was pleasantly surprised by the first book in this series last year. I literally just picked it up off the shelf at the library, not knowing anything about it. And while it does fall into a lot of the typical romantasy pitfalls, such as Deadly Trials, Fae, there were enough fresh twists on those ideas, and it was well written enough for it to be enjoyable. And my favorite part was the strong emphasis on female friendships over lackluster romantic relationships. I felt like that was very well done and didn't feel cheap, so I'm excited to read the second one. With a Vengeance by Riley Sager. Now, is Riley Sager a great author? No. Am I gonna read all of his new releases? Yeah, because it's kind of like watching The Bachelor. Sometimes you just need a nice, slightly trashy palette cleanser, and that is how I feel about Riley Sager. Although this book has horrid reviews, it is ready for me to pick up from the library, so I will probably go do that either today or tomorrow before I leave for vacation. We have Ali Hazelwood's third release of the year, Mate, which is the sequel to Bride, which was her paranormal romance book. As I said in my Ali Hazelwood video, not the biggest fan of paranormal romance, but I can adapt because it's Ali Hazelwood, and I enjoyed Bride for what it was despite not being a huge paranormal romance fan, so of course I will be reading the second one. I have read everything Ali Hazelwood has published with the exception of the novellas, and I will continue to. Alright, we have another fantasy doorstop, and that is The Sword of Kaigan by M.L. Wong. How long is it? 651 pages. I read Blood Over Brighthaven this year, and I really liked it. It was a 4.5 star read for me, and I've obviously heard amazing things about The Sword of Kaigan. Again, just one of those things where I have so many epic doorstop fantasy style books on my list this year, and I just don't have the mental bandwidth to go from one to the other without breaks in between. Otherwise, I just won't fully enjoy them because I'll be too lost in the sauce. So this has been on my list for a while. I look for it every single time I'm at the library, but because this was self-published, the library never bought it, and I've even looked for it at the bookstore and it's not been there, so I think it's something I would have to either order or read on Kindle, and that's really what's stopped me from reading it. Speaking of Draco Malfoy and the mortifying ordeal of being in love, the irresistible urge to fall in love with your enemy Academy. Same concept as Alchemized. If the author took the fan fiction and made it into a non-Harry Potter specific book, and it's getting published, and I am more excited about this than Alchemized because, you know, I can only do so many dark things per year and I need a little bit of fluff, and this book is going to give me the perfect fantasy romance fluff. The Incandescent by Emily Tesh. I almost bought this at the bookstore the other day too, but I'm gonna wait and get it from the library. I've been very, very good about using the library this year. I'm actually really impressed with myself. I did read one of Emily Tesh's other books and I enjoyed it well enough, and this seems like it is right up my alley. It says, Naomi Novik's Scholomance series meets plain bad heroines in the Sapphic Dark Academia fantasy. Sapphic Dark Academia. Now, could you say something that is gonna get me to read a book more than that? No, you could not. So I cannot wait. And the final book on my to be read for the rest of the year, not that I won't read other books, but these are just the ones that are on my radar. That is The Light of All That Falls by James Islington, the third book in the Lycanius trilogy. I read the first two last year, but again, needed a break. Then I read Wind and Truth by Brandon Sanderson, needed a break. So I'll probably end up reading like 2 or 3 out of these epic fantasies, but I will not be reading them back to back. So, but I do really need to finish this series before I forget everything, because I've already kind of forgotten everything. So I'll probably have to watch some sort of recap video or read a recap summary, because I'm horrible at remembering things from book to book if there's months or years in between, but I do want to know how it ends. So that is it. Thank you for coming along. Let me know if any of these are on your list or what else you're excited for the rest of the year. Thanks. Bye.